God doesn't exist. This is a claim that countless individuals make without looking into it, without doing research for themselves. If I were to prove this wrong, would you admit that God does indeed exist? If I were to give you infallible evidence, would you admit that he exists? My name is Matthew Davenport, and I plan on doing just that in the next 8 minutes. I plan on persuading each one of you of the existence of God. Now, I once also debated the existence of God. I wasn't sure, and so I did the logical thing and I dug and I looked into it. I did research, and what I found was that God does indeed exist, and the evidence is irrefutable. So, I've broken down some of the evidence that I found for all of you today into 3 separate points. The first being that time proves the existence of God. The second being that morality proves the existence of God. And the third being that science proves the existence of God. Now, time proves the existence of God. Countless individuals will claim that time is like a circle, if you will. It is infinitely always. It is never changing. It's always in the past, always in the future. There is no beginning. We only perceive today. Now, this claim is interesting. However, it falls apart when placed up against the actual definition of infinity as well as the law of causality. Now, the law of causality states that everything that is caused has a cause, right? And the definition of infinity was given by the man who actually invented the term and the symbol. It is a mathematician named John Wallis from 1657. An article by Britannica, which they published this year, spoke on him, and he broke it down into 3 separate categories. The first category of infinity is numerical infinity. Time cannot be numerical infinity because that is numbers. It is infinitely, you can count infinitely upwards, you can count infinitely downwards, right? Just like how you can in numbers, there's infinite negatives, infinite positives. Now, the second is physical infinity. This is what time is, because physical infinity is something that has a starting point and infinitely moves forward from that starting point. Now, just like we are in today, we are in this moment right now. We can't go back to yesterday. I can't go back to the beginning of the speech. We can only move forward in time. So therefore, there was a starting point. According to physical infinity, there was a starting point for which there was something, and now everything moves forward from that point. Now, if we pair this with the law of causality, then if there was an original point, original cause, then there had to be something that was that original cause. That brings us to metaphysical infinity. Metaphysical infinity is something that is infinitely existing backwards, infinitely existing forward, therefore never changing, always the same. Now, this thing in metaphysical infinity had to be the original cause, because the original cause could not be within the thing that it caused. That is utterly ridiculous. And so it had to be sentient, it had to be able to make decisions, it had to choose in this infinite nothing of metaphysical infinity. It had to be able to choose to now make something, and now there's infinitely something from that nothing. So that original cause had to be a sentient being which infinitely exists backwards and forward and never changing, aka God. The second point now we come to is morality proves the existence of God. The existence of morality is interesting. People often use the problem of evil or the existence of evil to try to disprove God. Now, evil actually has nothing to do with the existence of God. It only proves that we have free will. Free will by nature is the ability to choose what you want to do, right? You can do whatever you want, and so thereby you can choose to do what is good. Well, if you have free will, you can also choose to do what is not good or do what is evil. If we know what is good, if we have a standard of what is good, we should look at that instead of the standard of evil, because evil is just the absence of good. So if we look at goodness, where does that come from? Because every law has a lawgiver, right? So we all have a moral law, if you will, within us, a baseline goodness that we believe. We may disagree on little things, but there is a baseline goodness that we all believe. Therefore, this baseline goodness had to be given to us by something, by someone that is outside of ourselves. This brings us to our third point. The third point is that science proves the existence of God. People often say, I don't believe in God because I believe in science, or science disproves the existence of God. Science and God is often pitted against one another, when in reality they go hand in hand. I would like to look at an article by the National Eye Institute that they published in 2022. And this breaks down how the eye creates images, how you see things. Right? So first, light passes through the cornea. Okay. So the cornea is the dome-shaped part of your eye that then bends the light so that the eye can focus. Some of this light then enters through the opening called the pupil, and the iris, which is around the pupil, contracts and expands to control how much light it comes in. The light then passes through the lens once it goes through the pupil. The lens works together with the cornea to focus the light directly to the retina. Once the retina receives the light, then it sends the light through these special cells called photoreceptors. These photoreceptors then send the light via electrical signals to the brain. The brain then processes what these electrical signals mean and allows you to see things. It processes images for your mind. This process requires over 2 million working parts, and all happens within 13 milliseconds. To say that that happens by chance seems utterly ridiculous. If every painting has a painter, every design has a designer, why would the most complex design that you can possibly think of not have a designer? Why would that be the only exception of a designer? Now, in conclusion, we have looked at how science, how time, and how morality proves the existence of God. After looking at all of this, are you going to deny the infallible evidence that God exists? Are you willing to admit that he exists? Or are you going to choose to deliberately go against science, reason, and logic? Thank you.